Okay, we're a minute after, so I hope everybody's had a chance to join us. Like I said, welcome to the Innovative Women in Leadership virtual event series. We're going to be talking to Kathleen Bot today about shaping the future of disruption management. But before we get started, I want to invite you to join the conversation outside of this virtual event. If you do, on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on Instagram, whatever your social media poison of choice, make sure you're using these hashtags, hashtag I will for Innovative Women in Leadership, or hashtag TEVE for Thoughtexchange virtual events. Of course, we like to call this must-see TEV and VE, and today certainly is. Also, feel free to use the chat box. We really want to hear from you. We want to hear who you are, where you're from, what you're hoping to gain out of today's virtual event. Amelia, our program director, of course, is manning the chat. So anything you need, she'll be able to help you with. And any questions you put in there before we get to the exchange, we can hopefully address during the conversation. Now, I want to introduce you to Kathleen Bot. Kathleen is a management consultant with almost 20 years experience in organizational psychology. She started her career working as a human performance consultant for the U.S. Navy, working on revolutionary projects to improve sailor performance in the fleet. If you can do change management, I think in a large organization like that, then you're certainly an expert for today's topic. Her work in the Navy introduced her to the complexities of implementing change and managing disruption in large organizations. From there, Kathleen moved into the commercial sector, working with organizations like Siemens, Abbott Diagnostics, and Micro Focus to reduce the disruption associated with adopting new technologies, processes, and products. Welcome, Kathleen. We're so excited to have you.
Thank you, Angela.
Okay, so what we're going to chat about today, guys, we're going to be talking about Kathleen's background in disruption. We're going to be talking about what organizations typically do when they're faced with change and how Avalon Consulting really helps them to broaden their scope from those traditional approaches. We're going to be talking about change champions, the importance of those, how we get those, how we identify those. And then, of course, Kathleen's going to talk to us about using the learnings from disruption management to transform your leadership starting today. So, Kathleen, I'm so excited to get started. One of the things we do, though, before we really jump in to the conversation about disruption management is I like to ask our guests to participate in our 5-star questions. We've gotten to know you professionally, but we want to get to know you a little bit personally. Does that sound good?
Yes, sounds great.
Okay, great. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Beach or mountains?
Beach.
Okay. Road trips or air travel?
Air travel.
In-person meetings or virtual meetings?
In person, all the way.
Love it. Salty snacks or sweet tooth?
Oh, this one's tough. I would say probably salty.
Okay. And Twitter or Instagram?
Instagram.
Okay. Now we know all about you, Kathleen. See, that was it. Those 5 questions and we've got you pegged. No, I'm teasing, of course, but it's good to know you a little bit personally, and we certainly know about your background professionally, but I really would love to know about your background in disruption. Can you just give us some insight into that?
Sure. So I currently work for a technology consulting company that provides data and analytic solutions to some of the leading organizations in the world. So our primary focus is solving technology problems, but we also solve the people problems that are so prevalent with disruptive technologies that we're implementing. So as you know, just repeating sort of what you said about my background's in organizational psychology, and I've spent, the majority of my career focusing on helping organizations minimize the disruption associated with change. Mm-hmm. So 20 years ago, most of the work I did revolved around ensuring, people had the right skills for new technology, processes, and products. And, I was part of teams, excuse me, that created highly interactive training programs that were delivered at the right time, the right place. And so people were acquiring the skills to adopt the change. However, organizations were still struggling in getting people to really adopt change holistically. So they were addressing the skills for adoption, but not the emotions. Why do organizations, typically over focus on sort of the skills and the tactical parts of change? because you can't predict or plan for the breadth or depths of emotions when going through a major change initiative.
Yeah, that I think that that's always overlooked. I mean, even you're saying that this is where you started 20 years ago, but I think, gosh, we're still struggling with that, both on the organizational level and on a personal level, individual level.
Yes,
That's
definitely.
so interesting.
It's, I think for leaders, it's easy to focus on the tactical aspects, go and create project plans that have all of these hard deliverables and that can be easily equated to a return on investment equation. And ultimately, what we find is that leaders are less effective in acknowledging sort of that messiness with human emotion. And even like business and academia, they overlook it, and it usually dictates the success or failure of a change initiative.
Do you find that the reason that people, leaders shy away from that is because it's a great unknown, that they're scared of it, that it's a, coming from a place of fear, they can control the tactical knowledge rollout, but the human emotion thing, like you said, it's unpredictable. Do you think that that just keeps them kind of paralyzed from making movement on it?
Yeah, I think it's really just the fact that it's not tangible, and they typically underestimate the effort. So for example, when we're submitting proposals to these large organizations that are going through technological change, we include components of change management like communications and building champions and training as well as analytics. And typically they just sort of strike the change management aspects and keep the training. And it's like, oh, we'll handle the change management. That's easy. We can send out some communications. And they just don't understand the complexity.
Well, I think that's great. I'm so glad, because that really leads me to my next point, which is, how do organizations typically approach it? You talked about, they really want to focus on the tactical. What other things are they doing in these typical approaches to disruption or change management? And how does Avalon Consulting help these leaders and organizations really broaden their scope from that traditional approach?
Yeah. So let me just sort of start off, like, what are the emotions of change? So
Okay.
Initially, people experience some excitement, right? If it's a major technology that could initially create great gains in automating processes, those types of things, there can be this initial excitement. However, when you start breaking down all of the aspects and all of the effort that it's going to take to change, those emotions can turn to sadness, anger, fear, loneliness, even hurt. And so the mind really moves into a stressful state, coping with all of the new things it has to learn to change. And so, from like, how do we typically cope with change? And the way that individuals typically cope is through withdrawal. So withdraw from family, from friends, from colleagues. It might be that you work more than usual, you binge watch Netflix, you exercise compulsively, right?
Right.
These are all the things that we typically do when we're in a stressful state. And so what is the antidote for stress associated with change? It's connection. And there's many ways to encourage connection. And one of the most effective ways is identifying and embedding champions throughout the organization.
Okay. All right. So then how do you do that? How do you identify these change champions? How do you build them? How can they really help you be successful for that connection that you're describing?
Yeah, so champions are not easy to find. So usually when, I encounter an organization, there's, a handful of people that may naturally, their personalities may just naturally lend themselves to being a great champion. However, I work with leaders to identify people that can aspire to be great champions and give them the framework for success. And at a foundation, these people are generally passionate individuals that really can thrive when being hit by a tidal wave of negativity. So, I've created a framework, and I'd like to sort of walk you through that framework for identifying and building champions within the organization.
I think that would be so helpful to our attendees. If you have that framework, please, yes, share that with us.
Okay. So the first characteristic is, developing a compelling change vision. So this is like the very first step when you are embarking on change. There needs to be a compelling change vision that doesn't speak to an individual's thinking mind, it speaks to an individual's feeling mind. So that picture might, it tells the story about how customers are going to view the organization in the future, what employees are saying about what it's like to work there in the future, what even the press might say. And this allows people to have a very tangible understanding of what they're striving for.
Mm-hmm.
When you think about some of the greatest visionaries in our history, like Gandhi or Martin Luther King Jr., their message provoked such strong emotion that people were inspired to change, right?
Mm.
And then the other piece of it is that they can clearly communicate that vision. So the organization arms their champions with that vision, and then great champions are able to sort of include that vision in every communication that they embark on.
That's great, both internally and externally.
Yes, definitely.
Great.
And then the second piece is what I call say what you mean and mean what you say. So
Dr. Seuss, right?
exactly. So, great champions are honest and down to earth. And, I've seen a lot of leaders communicate like it's a press release, and, your employees can see through that. It comes off as inauthentic.
Mm-hmm.
So a great champion is working to gain trust. And the way that they can do that is, share the process that they're going through, share some of the challenges that they encounter throughout this change initiative, and provide them with consistent bites of information. And what we encourage people to do is like have a communication cadence that's about every 2 to 3 weeks, because you're working to fill a void that is currently being filled with those emotions that I discussed before of anxiety and those types of things. And the more information you can provide them is just going to, make them feel more comfortable with the change.
Yeah, you're right. In the absence of communications, they're building their own narrative in their head.
Yes.
And so if you can create a communications cadence that's pretty regular and frequent, then that narrative, that negative narrative, doesn't have an opportunity to form.
Exactly. And I see a lot of leaders feel as though they can't share information because it's not fully baked or refined.
Mm-hmm.
And, what I encourage them to do is just say, okay, well, what is there a small piece of this that we can share, right? Like people would rather have, sort of draft information to have something to sink their teeth in, right? Rather than waiting in the abyss of silence.
It's true. Yeah. Even a small nugget of information is better than none at all.
Exactly.
Yeah. I love that.
So the next one is listen with openness and respect. And it might seem it might seem obvious, but, I think with that great champion that is being sort of bombarded with this tidal wave of negativity, sometimes it's easy to try to jump to solving problems and answering questions. However, great champions like first listen, and then they validate their concern. So, they are able to say, I understand that must seem like it's very challenging for you, but however, I want to find an answer for you. And rather than sort of jumping to a solution, just sort of validate their concern and maybe walk away for 24, 40, 48 hours and identify sort of a thoughtful response, maybe get some more information from leadership rather than trying to solve it. I mean, there's going to be situations where you disagree with someone's perspective, right? And it's just better to sort of walk away, collect your thoughts, and then come back and address them.
Yeah. That's great. The way that you're describing, and is there one more piece of the framework?
There is, but we can
I
talk.
just want to ask you a quick question, because the way you're describing this framework, it seems like these champions could be at any level within the organization. And would you encourage them to be at certain levels? Do you find that champions are found most often in middle management or individual contributor level or at the leadership level? What would you say, if there's any difference depending on where they are in the organization?
They're at all levels of the organization.
Okay.
So I think, people typically look at leadership, and I think there might be a few people inside leadership that are great champions. However, you want champions at all levels of the organization. So they're representing, each of the different business units at each of the different levels.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. Thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah, and I also just sort of wanted to plug Thoughtexchange a little bit, because it's really been a game changer for us in embarking on these change initiatives, because it creates a tool to encourage connection between champions and employees. So we use it to remain extremely agile during change initiatives. So, champions can go out to employees with a question and understand what is at the forefront of their minds at a particular time, and then craft those communications and change initiatives to address the current climate within the organization. So it really helps us with agility. And we also use it so employees have buy-in to shaping the future of the organization together with leadership.
I'm so glad to hear that it's been such a game changer for you, because you're right. It does fit, I think, perfectly into this framework that you're outlining for us. And even one of the tips that you gave about, sometimes you're not always going to agree, you're not always going to see eye to eye, but it helps you at least start that conversation in a safe space so that people can give you their open and honest feedback. And then as a leader or a champion, it gives you the opportunity. The tool allows you to think about it and then come back with a response that I think would be beneficial for everyone.
Yes, definitely.
Great.
And then the last one, just really quickly, is a great champion represents all its constituents. So you're not just representing leadership and the executives within the organization, to provide the organization with this vision, but you have to sort of understand when you need to go to bat for employees, and when the details of that vision need to be challenged because of real issues that are important to employees.
So I'm just going to give a brief overview again of the framework so our attendees can make sure that they've got it all. Developing a compelling change vision. Say what you mean and mean what you say. Listen with openness and respect. And then a great champion represents all constituents. Great. And so you talked about how you kind of maybe identify them, and this framework will help you also, once you've identified them, to build all four of those skills, right?
Yes.
That's lovely. Okay, so talk to me then a little bit, Kathleen, about how do we take these learnings and help them transform our leadership starting today?
Yeah. And I would say, this expands to all facets of life, even outside of your professional experience. So people are experiencing change in their personal lives, right? Their professional lives. And really, we live in this modern world that promotes stress, anxiety, and ultimately isolation in some cases. So when you see individuals experiencing challenges in life, a great leader, is always going to identify ways to connect with their people. And I have done some work even with like performance management and people managers in similar ways when it comes to managing performance. It's you want to really connect often and promote open and honest dialogues that can be used in finding a better path forward together, right? I'll even share a little personal story that I experienced last week. And my 5-year-old, she just started kindergarten. And not only was she, starting at a new school, new friends, new schedule, but we also put her in a language immersion program where the teacher only speaks in a foreign language. And it was just interesting to sort of watch my little bubbly 5-year-old sort of began exhibiting these behaviors of like irritability and sadness and picking fights with her little sister. And it just dawned on me, like this weekend, I was like, I need to be a better champion for her. And I started sort of using like my experience in change management and talking, you know, validating her emotions and talking through each of these things. And as soon as I started to do that, you know, within a few minutes, we were getting to a better place. And what I've seen is sort of like this transformation in her ability to sort of accept that this is going to be a challenging time, but it will pass eventually.
That is such a great story. I'm so excited that you shared that with us, because I know we're doing our first couple of weeks of school right now, and it's making me be really reflective about like how I can be a champion for change in all facets of my life, with my children, with my husband, with my friends that are, you know, like you said, we all experience major bouts of change, whether it's, you know, a big move or whatever it is personally, a new school, a new job. I think that this is good. And this framework can help make sure not only are we identifying and building them in our own organizations, but we're also identifying and building those same strengths within ourselves.
Yeah, definitely.
Great. Okay, this has been so insightful, Kathleen. I'm so excited that we're talking about this. Now what I want to do is open up this conversation to our attendees so that they can pick your brain, they can ask you some questions, and we can dig into what they want to know more about. So Amelia just posted the link to the exchange in the chat box. I am going to share my screen with you guys again so that you can get out your mobile devices so you can join us there. Let me share my screen. If you've got your mobile device, just go ahead and open up your camera. You'll zoom in on the QR code and it will have a pop down. You click on it, you go right into the exchange. You don't have to sign up, guys. All you have to do is agree to the terms of use, and then you'll go right in to participate. If it's easier, you can always go to thoughtexchange.com/join and enter the 9-digit code you see on the screen. 759-790-907. Either way will take you right there. So you've got 3 options to join. The question we're asking today is, what thoughts or questions do you have for Kathleen? What do you want to know more about? Be sure you go in there, you share those thoughts and questions. Once you've done that, then you'll want to go to the star step and rate the thoughts of others. Remember, 1, if you don't really agree with it, you don't strongly prioritize that. 5, if you do really strongly prioritize and want to hear more about that. Be sure and rate as many as you possibly can. We'll give you a few minutes to do that, and then we'll dive into the Top Thoughts report with Kathleen. In order for you to participate, I'm going to need to stop talking. So I'm going to do that now while we all jump into the exchange. As you'll see here on the screen, this is just a visualization of how we're all interacting with each other. Each purple person represents someone who is participating in the exchange. Each blue dialog box represents a thought that they have shared, and each orange line represents a thought that they have rated. We're going to dive into the Top Thoughts report now, so go ahead and get your last ratings in. I'm going to refresh. Kathleen, are you ready to dive into these thoughts and questions?
I am.
Okay, great. How can individual contributors help champions when there's too much negativity in a group? Sometimes I feel that even champions could miss the conversations that are happening around the water cooler.
Yes, this is a great question. And so what I would say is that it is great to have individuals within the organization that sit in sort of different subgroups, and they help feed information to the champions. And so I think that individual contributors can help facilitate, you know, the change process by identifying the issues that are at the forefront of individuals' minds. And so they're just, you know, helping with the communication and identifying what types of issues need to be discussed with the groups.
Yeah, almost as if the champions have kind of a team of assistant champions around them that can be helping. Yeah, I think that's right. That's smart. You know, no man's an island, and so utilizing your network, or utilizing the networks around your champions so that they're kind of keeping their ear to the ground to help with those communications.
Exactly.
That's lovely. Good tip. What is the cost to an organization if they only focus on the tactical portions of change?
Yeah, so there's pretty gloomy research out there on the amount of change initiatives that fail. And the
Oh,
reality
wow.
is that it's 50 to 70% fail, and it isn't due to sort of the technology failing or mapping out the right processes or purchasing the wrong company. It's because they underestimate the effort it takes for team members really to adopt a shared vision and buy into a big idea. And so, I mean, even in mergers and acquisitions, I think it's like 80% of mergers and acquisitions don't result in increased shareholder value because there's just not enough emphasis on the people side of change.
Wow, those are really high percentages. I'm so surprised to hear that.
Yeah, it's pretty scary, and we certainly use these statistics, when we're talking to our organizations and say and equating it to sort of the budget that they've secured, for some major technology implementation, and sort of visualizing taking that budget and going out and throwing it in the dumpster because they're not looking at change holistically in the tactical aspects as well as sort of the people aspects.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that there's this idea that these kind of softer skills or this people management portion of change management is not really tied to dollars and cents. And so I think when Avalon, you guys do such a fantastic job of really highlighting the importance of that return on that investment once you do that. And I'm sure that because of that emphasis, you see the organizations that you work with be far more successful in their change management in regards to technology rollouts or mergers and acquisitions. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
That's wonderful. Okay, good. Did any surprising insights come up in your exchange? I think what they're referring to is like when you're using Thoughtexchange for these change management things, are there any big surprising insights that come when you're using them with the organizations that you consult?
Yeah, a few things come to mind, and it's specifically when one thing that comes to mind is when we specifically talk about culture with organizations and integrating cultures, and really identifying what people value the most about their culture. And then having the ability to go and look at different groups. So, for example, I've witnessed one exchange where a thought about, I want to ensure that I work for an organization who does social good. And it wasn't rated very high, but then when we went and looked at the subgroups, right, it was, there was a bunch of people that rated it very high, but then there was like 3 or 4 people that rated it very low. And it's those types of insights that help shape our conversations moving forward, and things about like work-life balance, what does work-life balance really mean to each individual, right? So it means something different to each person. So I think there's so many great things that I've discovered in shaping in integrating cultures that are going through change.
Yeah, I think that's so insightful that you're able to, you have to look at the exchanges and the data analytics tools in a really robust way in order to really get the fullest picture of the data. Because if you just went off the top thoughts report and the culture said, oh, no, we don't value working for a company that's socially just, or we have that at the forefront of our culture. But then you go into the differences tab and you see, oh, actually a huge portion of the group does really find that to be impactful, and just these other few are skewing it so that it's not making it into the top thoughts report. I think that that's great. And as TE experts, you guys know that you should be doing that in order to get the best insights. So that's great. What are some of the repercussions of not managing disruption correctly? I know you've talked a little bit about the cost to a company. Are there other things that we're not considering?
So I would say one of the biggest things is turnover, right? So I was recently working with a major organization that was going through an acquisition, and because they only focus on the tactical aspects, they are now, experiencing extreme turnover, and we talked about doing an exchange with them to say, like, how do we build trust again within this organization? So at the most extreme, there is very high costs associated to people fleeing because of fear and anxiety.
Wow, that's right. I think, and I don't think that that's overstated to say people are fleeing from the organization. You mentioned earlier, Kathleen, that I just wrote a note down that stress associated with change usually results in withdrawal. And really, that is what attrition is, right? That's the people literally withdrawing because of that stress from the organization.
Yeah.
So I'm not surprised to hear that would come as at a huge cost for organizations who aren't doing it correctly.
Yeah, and I think just engagement in general, right? So initially, their like motivation dips. So productivity is affected directly. So that's another extreme cost when it comes to not managing change correctly.
You're right. Even if they stick around, they're not producing at the level they were because they're feeling such stress from the change.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. How do people feel more comfortable with change now? I think that this is a great question. I think I'm going to imply here that they mean relative to, let's say, when you first started your career with disruption. Do you feel like people, because of the world we live in now and because of these advances in technology and kind of the society we live in where we're bombarded with things pivoting quickly, do you think people generally are more comfortable with change nowadays?
Yes, I think that people are more comfortable in realizing that if they don't address change, that there's going to be repercussions. So the rate in which the world is changing is creating a huge impact to organizations now. We think about IT organizations sort of trying to be more agile and all those types of things so they can produce software faster. And so I think that we're learning techniques on how to cope with change more effectively now, and people are really open to identifying that this is critical to running my business.
That's great. That's really good news. I think that, there's a shift then that's happening, that people are more open to approaching it in new and innovative ways. What question did you ask in your thought exchange during an M&A? I think this is a great one. And I actually want to extend it further. Can you give us any specific questions that you use with any of your organizations, whether it was for a merger and an acquisition or whether it was for a technology rollout, any kind of disruption change? Do you know what questions you used?
Yeah, I could probably speak in general. I'm
Okay.
not going to probably remember the exact questions, but I think I've touched on a few. So how can we build trust within or how can we restore trust within the organization?
That's a great question.
I have recently been working with this publishing organization, and as you know, publishing right now is going through massive changes in how to engage their audiences, from a content perspective with all of the competition out there. And the exchange we did was something around like, how can we enhance innovation and really adapt to sort of the what is the market is facing us with right now.
I like that question a lot, because I think so much of what we really value here at Thought Exchange is our ability to tap into the intelligence of everyone, no matter where they are in the organization, no matter what level. And so hearing that you're advising people to use that, how can we encourage innovation and adapt to the market, I think is a great use of the tool and a great way to tap into that kind of intelligence of the entire employee base.
Yeah, and then I think I touched a little bit about all of the things that we've asked around culture, like what are the most important elements of our culture that you would like to retain, within the new organization? Because in mergers and acquisitions, the reason why they have such high failure rate is inability to create sort of a new integrated culture. Organizations typically expect one culture to adapt to the other, rather than creating a sort of a new culture that takes the best of both worlds. And so there's been a lot of questions, sort of digging into what type of culture people would, aspire to be in.
Yeah, that's great. I think you're right. I think that you touched on some opportunities of how you're using it to tap into innovation and intelligence, crowdsource new innovative ideas, and then also utilizing it for that community alignment. Okay, we both have two separate cultures, but how can we work together to prioritize what our new culture should look like and include? So I'm so glad to hear that. And then we have our final question here, Kathleen, that I'd like to dive into before we wrap up for today. Can surveys help with disruption management?
Yes, and I think the answer is yes. Ultimately, you are wanting to collect as much information as possible from employees, so you can understand really what they're struggling with and create a change initiatives that addresses those key points, and surveys can certainly help you do that.
Yeah. Great. Okay, Kathleen, this has been so insightful, so robust. I really appreciate the framework that you've given everybody, and the ability to kind of give ourselves a compass for disruption management as we move out into the world, both in our organizations and in our personal life. So thank you so much for today. I really, really appreciate it. And I'm super excited because I'm going to see you tomorrow when we're in Vancouver for the Transform Summit, where you'll be presenting a lot of these ideas, diving in a little bit further. And I'm not sure, Amelia, is Kathleen part of our live stream session? Hoping. Well, if she is, her and other leaders that are presenting will be part of our live stream session while we're in Vancouver. So you can always register to sign up for that. And even if you're not in Vancouver with us, you can certainly be privy to all of the wonderful presentations that are happening there tomorrow. So thank you so much again, Kathleen. It's been really a pleasure.
Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, so great. I'll see you tomorrow. Travel safe. Thanks so much for attending, guys. If you want to learn more about Thoughtexchange, please stick around. Amelia's going to post a link so you can meet with Agnes more. She is waiting for you to answer any questions you have about Thoughtexchange. We'll be sending the report of the exchange we did today and a recording out in case you missed it, in case you want to pass it on to other people in your organization. Otherwise, we'll see you tomorrow for another episode of the Innovative Women in Leadership Virtual Event Series. Thanks again, Kathleen.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.